So you're just starting out as a reseller and you're deciding where you should list. Should you list on eBay, Etsy, or Grailed? Today I'm going to be covering the difference between these three platforms and which one you should be working on. So stick around. Thanks for tuning in for another video, guys. My name is Phil Jones, also known as the King of Thrift. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you guys the difference between eBay, Etsy, and Grailed. So if you're just starting out and you're not sure where you should be selling, by the end of this video, you should have a pretty good idea. If you want to get started reselling, then subscribe to this channel right now. And if you're really serious about your reselling journey and kicking it into overdrive, then shoot on over to thekingofthrift.com and download How to Crush It Reselling with No Experience. Links in the description. Now, with that out of the way, guys, let's get right into the topic today. I remember when I started out in this game, I made my first sale back in 2001. By 2003, I had gone full time, but the big problem that I had back then was there was only one platform to sell on. Actually, I guess there were two. There was eBay and there was Craigslist. Now, eBay was basically a glorified yard sale. Craigslist was exactly the way it is today. Craigslist has not changed over the years, but eBay has changed tremendously. And back then, eBay actually looked just like Craigslist. The biggest difference was on eBay, the majority of all the sales were Beanie Babies and baseball cards. People weren't just selling Beanie Babies and baseball cards, they were selling everything. But back then, the biggest majority of what was being sold were those two items. Now, after that, people started moving into the next biggest item that was selling on eBay at the time, which was clothing. And it was actually vintage clothing and vintage shoes. Now, the biggest problem that I had was whenever I would list my items, sometimes I would list something like, say, a vintage item. I would list it on eBay. I would have a toaster oven. I would list it on eBay. I would have a pair of snow skis. I would list it on eBay. A pair of water skis listed on eBay. I mean, basically, there was only eBay and Craigslist. So that being said, fast forward to where we are now, and we have many, many platforms. I mean, there's Mercari, there's OfferUp, there's Facebook Marketplace, there's eBay, there's Etsy, there's Grailed. I mean, there's Thrifted. I mean, the list goes on, and this is really good for us, guys. Basically, what this has done was put the power into the hands of the seller, whereas back then, all the power was owned by the platforms. Or let's say platform singular, because it was just eBay at the time. And they basically had a monopoly on everything. And you either sold it there for the price that it was selling for, or you didn't sell it at all. And now what you can do is, with these different platforms, each specializing in their own particular items or their own type of items, if you list the items on the correct platform, you're going to get a lot more money than if you list it on the wrong one. So knowing which platform that you should be working on is very important. I'm going to run down the best things to sell on each of these platforms. So hopefully by the end of this, it will give you a pretty good idea of what platform you should be selling your inventory on. Okay, on eBay, these are going to be your top items to sell, or some of the main items that you want to sell: clothing, men's clothing, women's clothing, children's clothing, luxury watches, luxury goods. You can sell cars, you can sell boats, you can sell home furnishings, you can sell purses, you can sell sneakers, or baseball cards, or basically any type of collectible cards for that matter. All of these items sell good on eBay. Now, I don't like to say that these particular items only sell good on eBay. These are just a good list of items that will sell good on eBay. So that being said, many times you will want to list something on multiple platforms. You don't want to list it just on eBay or just on Grailed, just Mercari, whatever. If the item is applicable to each platform, in other words, if this platform, the items sell well on this particular platform, then you should list them there. And if they sell well on another particular platform as well as there, then you should list them on both. And if they sell, again, very well on another platform, that particular type of item, then you should list it on all three or more platforms. The more, the better, guys. Just remember, it comes a point to where if you're spending more and more time to list a single item, if that item isn't worth a particular dollar amount and you've spent 3, 4, 5 hours, you do the math. If you spend 4 or 5 hours plus the money you spent on the item, that's going to add up to, you need to get, in other words, you need to be compensated for your time. So take your time into account when you are doing this and when you're listing items and doing research and so forth. Okay, Etsy platform. Should you be selling on Etsy? Now, Etsy is a great platform for vintage clothing. I sell tons of vintage clothing on Etsy. Well, actually, to be honest, I sell more vintage clothing on eBay than Etsy, but right behind eBay is our second biggest platform is Etsy. Now, on Etsy, what they specialize in, and matter of fact, the only things that are allowed to be listed on Etsy are vintage items, collectibles, and homemade items, or craft items, or whatever you want to call them, things that people have made themselves. So those are your three types. You got vintage clothing, antiques, collectibles, and crafts and hobbies and art. So if it applies to any of these categories, you want to go straight to Etsy. That's going to be your best bet. But as well as listing on Etsy, make sure that you list it on eBay as well, because you'll probably do equally or perhaps maybe even better on eBay. It really depends on the item and your particular audience. An audience will begin to grow as you list your items, as your store grows, as you begin to specialize in a particular area of items or of inventory. Then your customer base will grow, and those who shop with you, you will have repeat customers. And basically what will happen is the algorithm will love you for that fact, and they will raise you in the search rankings. And over time, what will happen is it's sort of a compound effort. Like I said, things add up over time. Small efforts add up over time. Tons of small efforts add up over time. And what happens is the algorithm takes into account everything that you sold over time, how many you've sold, how often you sell them, how much of this particular type of item you have. It takes all these things into account, and that's what's offered up to the search engine. And that's what depends on how well you are offered up to the consumers. So having said that, hopefully that makes sense. But basically, the more you specialize in an item, the more you're going to be able to sell those particular items for. So if you specialize in ceramic Christmas trees, and someone else, just picks up a ceramic Christmas tree, guess what? You're going to be able to sell that ceramic tree for a lot more than they would, because that's what you specialize in. So keep that in mind. Okay, Grailed. If you're wondering if you should sell on Grailed or not, it's pretty simple. With Grailed, they are a clothing platform only. Now, up until just recently, they were only men's or young men's clothing, but now they have actually added women's to the mix also. So if you're selling women's vintage clothing, or if you're selling men's vintage clothing, and specifically vintage, I mean 80s and 90s and mid-noughties. So it's basically streetwear. Grailed is the best place to sell your streetwear. But if you list it on Grailed, guess what? What I do is if I list it on Grailed, then it gets listed on Etsy and it gets listed on eBay. Matter of fact, I list it on eBay first, I'll list it on Grailed second, and then lastly, on Etsy second, and then lastly, I'll list it on Grailed. And like I said, Grailed specializes in streetwear. So, and that's going to include women's or men's, and also a lot of contemporary items also. So if you have modern or contemporary or very, very trendy clothes, Grailed is going to be a really hot spot, especially for trending things like Supreme and Bape. I don't even know if Bape's even a thing anymore, but any of those really trendy brands, go over to Grailed. That's going to be your best bet. Collectible sneakers also sell really well on Grailed. And let's not forget men's accessories, boots, jackets, blazers, basically everything as far as men's clothes. If you've got men's clothes, you want to definitely list it on Grailed. You want to list it on Etsy if it's vintage, and you also want to list it on eBay. Okay, so let's say you're out today and you pick up a nice blazer, you pick up a bread maker, you pick up a nice pair of sneakers, and a collectible magazine. Now, where should you list all these items? Well, the collectible magazine, you should list on eBay, and you should list it on Etsy. Don't list it on Grailed because it's not clothing. The blazer, you want to list on Grailed, and you want to list it on eBay because it's a modern blazer. It's not a vintage blazer. If it was vintage, then you would list it on all three platforms. Now, these sneakers, depending on whether they're vintage or modern, if they are modern or contemporary, then you want to list them on eBay, and that's it. Well, actually, you could list them on eBay and Grailed. Don't list them on Etsy because that is only for vintage. And the bread maker, you'll definitely want to list that also on eBay. You could also list that on Mercari. That's a little bonus for you. But eBay is going to be the only place for that bread maker. You could throw it on Craigslist. Craigslist always does okay, but if it's worth a decent amount of money, eBay is definitely the place. If it's not really a very expensive item, then you can just put it on OfferUp or Facebook Marketplace and have it picked up locally. That way you don't have to worry about having it boxed and packaged. Because the thing is, like with a bread maker or something like that, unless it's hitting over like maybe the $100 mark because of the shipping cost, it's really not worth it to ship it out. It really works out much better if you have a $35 or maybe a $40 item, or even make a $25 bread maker. You want to sell it locally and just skip the shipping charges altogether. It's going to save you a lot of time and hassle. And if you want to learn more about reselling right now, then click on this video right here. Or is it right here? Hopefully this cleared things up for you a little bit if you're just starting out, or even if you're established and you're just not sure where you should be selling. If this video helped you out, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? And if you're really serious about taking your reselling journey and kicking it into overdrive, shoot over to thekingofthrift.com and download How to Crush It Reselling, with no experience, guys. The link's in the description. I'll see you there. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the future.